through the hot red tides of sin.
This is Faith Blind
Counsel.
Everything is within.
You create the light. We are one.
That's it.
Sure, it's actually recording me. Hello, yes. I see frequencies, so supposedly it is recording.
Cool. By the way, I'm just gonna leave all of this in. I'm just gonna leave all of everybody just figuring out their shit.
Just fucking around.
This whole thing is just fucking around.
Top quality entertainment.
If we're being honest, it's like, you know, like in that one Eminem song when he's always like, hey, turn the snare up in my headphones. And it's supposed to feel like you're actually in the studio, even though it's very obviously something they put in. That's what I'm going to do with all of this. That way it feels more raw and realistic.
Yeah. Good.
It's going to...
Like, you're right.
It'll work. It'll
I'd
be
pay
fine.
top dollar for that.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Well, I mean, paying any dollar for anything... in this type of economy, it's booming, so fuck it. Why not?
Oh, yeah.
This is the Faith Blind Counsel podcast. We're here. We're barely in time, but we're gonna make it, and it's gonna be good. Here we are. This is the episode where we're gonna talk about non-paradigmal magic. I'm just going right into it. That's what I'm gonna do.
Sounds
I respect it.
That's what we're gonna do. So non-paradigmal magic, Yara. This is a thing that you've been working on, like, for a fucking decade or some shit now.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. Like, I tried, like, writing a book on it, like, 5 or 6 years ago or some shit. Then it just lost steam because I got bored.
So, writing books is
Fair
fucking
enough.
boring. But non-paradigmal magic is a thing. I feel like at its core, it's very simple, but it also is a thing that requires a lot of confidence in oneself as a magician.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, especially because a lot of it either requires confidence in your own capability of building the ritual itself, or a strength in your power of belief.
Yeah, so I guess the place to start out is defining non-paradigmal magic. We should probably go there.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So, in a few words, what would you sum up non-paradigmal magic as?
Magic with no formal structure that incorporates within the ritual whatever the magician decides that it needs, I guess. It's kind of hard because, like, okay, so when we talk about paradigms, it's like philosophy or structure or whatever, like most commonly defined as religions or beliefs or whatever. But what non-paradigmal magic is basically just doing shit because you believe that the outcome will happen, or like the desired outcome will happen, and it doesn't have any formal structure. There's no like, oh well, this book told me to do it. It's just, or like this religion, they said that there's this, or this god, the book of correspondences, it needs this specific incense. No, it's just, I'm going to do this thing because by doing this thing, the outcome that I want is going to happen.
So basically, like, it's what chaos magic ultimately is, just taken to like a logical extreme.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, I feel like the most basic expression of non-paradigmal magic is just sigils in general. Like, a sigil doesn't rely on some god power or some, like, you know, whatever, you know, centuries old fucking traditions or whatever. It's just a thing. You just draw the thing and you do it, and then that's the magic, right?
Right, yeah, I mean, that's a good basis, but even then, like, where I started with it didn't even use sigils. So, it was just, okay, so my history of doing this and what really started with me is like, so a little over a decade ago, on the internet, it was, especially on like dumb image boards like 4chan's X board, the paranormal board, they had it was really popular at the time to write like creepypasta rituals. So it was like go do this spooky thing in a bathroom that's completely empty, and kind of like Bloody Mary, right?
Yeah, like these tales that you could go do these things and these stories and something will happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and so like that's where I started with it, and like that's where it kind of picked up, is just like, okay, well, there's no formal paradigm that these came from except the mind of like bored teenagers, young 20-somethings who are like, ha ha, spooky story. So I kind of built my practice for a little while just doing, ha ha, spooky story. And it kind of developed from there, where like, I would take this spooky story and start building a paradigm from it.
I feel like basically it sounds like you started reading like scary stories to tell in the dark, and it just got really out of hand.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. But I mean, even then, like the scary stories to tell in the dark, those stories are rooted in folklore, so that in itself comes from a paradigm.
Okay, so I guess really the crux of non-paradigmal magic comes down to, like, what is a paradigm? Does it become a paradigm just based on how established it is?
Right, and that's kind of the point where I was coming from with it, because, like, even with other structures, like, as tenuous as they are, like, even going back to, like, scary stories to tell in the dark, like, I keep thinking of that one fucking story, Harold, with the goddamn scarecrow, and just, like, them skinning a dude and throwing his skin on a roof, which, let me tell you, was very sculpting in my 8-year-old life.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, those things scarred me in a very special way as a child.
Oh, fuck
I still
yeah.
have all 3 of those books.
Yeah. But see, like, even that it's kind of rooted in folklore, and even if it's not, like, it's still an established egregore because other people have ingested that media and done whatever with it, which I guess could be the same with all of these other stories, but, like, because they were just taken at face value, just kind of like, well, this is a spooky story. Like, no one had really worked with it, and so, like, using those things as, like, a template, I started creating similar rituals, and then, in due course, coming into contact with entities with nothing at all.
Okay. So what I guess your definition of a paradigm is based on the means, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you go about doing the thing, right? Okay. Cologne, do you have, like, is that something that resonates with you, or do you kind of have a different view of it?
I mean, I haven't been working with it particularly long. As far as paradigms, I don't know, I could probably make all kinds of arguments about the fact that maybe creepypasta could still be considered some sort of paradigm, but that'd be splitting a bunch of semantic arguments.
No. It kind of is. It's just I was using that whole concept of, like, taking the rituals built from the creepypastas and either A, actually doing them and contacting entities that weren't discussed or weren't spoken of or whatever, or
cataloged in some way.
Yeah, or I was using them as, like, a template, as kind of like something like, okay, so one that comes to mind particularly is the there was I was on another podcast a while ago called Three Kings, and that's a subreddit based around the ritual, the Three Kings ritual, which is paramount, like, non-paradigmal things that I first got into. This dude, Fableforge, posted on Reddit like 8 or 9 years ago, and it started in the No Sleep subreddit, so clearly it was like a horror story, whatever. And it was like, this ritual that I did when I was younger, and like it involved a fucking candle or some shit, and then like 2 mirrors, and 2 people would show up, thus making you and the other 2 people the Three Kings. Well, it was from this, like, someone had posted, and I think that the original post had since been deleted, but it was called the Sages of Four. That was the ritual that really, like, kicked it off for me, because all it was just a ritual structure, and that's it. It didn't give any, like, outcome, really. It was just, like, you do this ritual with a mirror, and then something spooky shows up in the mirror, and don't do it. Which is how every fucking creepypasta ended. Just, hey, here's how to do it, but don't.
Well, that's lame as fuck.
Yeah.
It's like Carol saying, hey, don't summon the demon god of entropy and death. Fuck you.
Yeah.
Do what I want.
Yeah. Fuck you, buddy. I'm doing it anyway.
You're not my real dad.
Yeah. You're just my weekend dad.
Not even that. You're just a weird guy that wrote a book once. And you look kind of like he looks like if Duff McKagan just really let himself go.
Yeah.
That's what Peter Carroll looks like.
But so with the Sages of Four, basically, like, it had all of these, like, different weird ritual components. So, like, you built up this fucking ritual space, and it involved a mirror, and an upturned chair, a book turned to page, like, 44, upturned, a piece of silver, a jar of dirt, a jar of water, a jar of air, and then a candle representing the 4 elements, and then you had to have a drop of blood put on the silver, and you had to face a certain direction, and you had to do it at a certain time. And so it was like all of these different, very specific components, but then afterwards it was just like, yeah, like, depending on what direction you face, something different will happen, and I'm not going to give any more information. So if you want to learn more, you have to do it, but don't do it.
That's dumb.
Yeah, and so
don't tell me what to do.
Right, and so, like, the thing was, it was like, oh, they've got all these different directions and whatever, but don't, like, even if you do this ritual and don't do it, don't ever face south. Like, okay, well, that's the first direction I faced when I did it that night.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't you?
Right. And I, like, even though they're like, oh, don't do it, I continued, and, I subsequently performed this ritual, like, at least 24 more times just for research. Like, okay, well, what are the different directions? Like, how do those play into things? And all of that shit. And it was through my research that I discovered that this was a method by which one can contact lost egregores.
Okay.
Cool.
So it seems like for you, not only is it about the means, right? The means being whatever you decide they are as the practitioner. But in addition, it's also about the idea that you are approaching something that is not established.
Yes, that really is like the ultimate definition for me. Like, it's nothing established. You're either ripping it from your own head or from some source that no one fucking works with at all, because they don't see it as a magical source, and it's not well known or anything. So it's not like pop magic where, like, they're an established egregore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was having not an argument, but a discussion earlier, a week or so ago, about how basically everything at some point is now established as an egregore, right? Even if like I don't know, some fucking demon is not real, right? At this point, it's now established as an egregore because enough people have read the book and are like, yeah, okay, this is a demon, right?
Yep.
One example that comes to mind for that for me is there's a demon that kind of like came out of like the satanic panic and like Ouija boards and shit.
Oh,
fucking Zozo.
Yeah, Zozo.
Like Zozo is not a thing that is established anywhere, but some dude was like, I did a Ouija board and now there's Zozo in my house. And enough people, like, it gained enough traction and now it's a thing.
Isn't it because like Z and O are like right next to each other on the Ouija board? He might have just like twitched a couple times and come up with a name.
Yeah, doesn't matter though, because now people believe in it, right?
Yeah. And so
it's kind of like how gossip works.
Right. But see, and that's like non-paradigmal magic. Yeah, it can start as non-paradigmal, but then you create your own paradigm. You create your own pantheon or whatever. But even then, like, it's not established in anything but your own or your own group's collective thought.
Okay, so kind of like what a lot of cults in the 70s did, where they just started mashing a bunch of different theology together and then made rituals about it, and then like you had fucking like Shinrikyo or whatever the fuck, right?
Right. Well, I mean, kind of, sort of, because even then they're like smashing previously known theologies with this. There's no previously known theology. So like take the Sages of Four ritual. Like, why is there an upturned book at page 44? I don't know, felt good. So fucking throw that in the ritual. And then you do other shit like that. So you build your own ritual, which kind of like how we discussed in like the first episode with the banishing of like hucking a piece of ham at a wall. That would be a non-paradigmal ritual.
Yeah. I feel like it's hard to nail down because to me, non-paradigmal just feels so natural. Like, you just use the shit that's around.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially so when it has no prior establishment. So, like, yeah, you have shit that's around, but even then, like, when you're touching on prior paradigms that would be like, well, I need sandalwood incense for, like, cleansing or some shit. That's still touching in an established paradigm, as opposed to, well, for me to purify this room, I need like urinal deodorant spray.
Florida water.
Yeah, that's still established.
But it's also urinal spray.
It kind of is. Yeah. It's a good one though, and frankly, if they used that in my work instead of whatever the fuck they're using and stopped piping hot water through the urinals, the whole place wouldn't smell like a pot of hot piss.
I've been there. He's not wrong.
Who pipes hot water through a urinal? Who's like, yeah, I'm done. Better cook it.
I'll tell you
tremendous waste of energy.
Bear Grylls.
Yeah.
That's who.
Fuck. But yeah, so like nothing prior established. So like there's even within like herbalism or, well, for me to have good luck or something, I need like cinquefoil, or I need fucking like rue or some other herb. Instead, like, oh, I need to make a cleansing bath. How about this inhaler right here? I'm gonna huck that in the bath water.
Yeah, but I feel like at a certain point you're just splitting hairs, right? Because you could then argue that the process of doing magic is in itself something that's already pre-established, right? Who says you need to add anything to get a result?
True.
Like, that's something that's already established. So what I'm getting at there is the idea that, like, non-paradigmal is something that exists in gradient. I don't think there's a black and white distinction.
It's very much a spectrum kind of deal. But it's more based on personal expression and not being bound to prior knowledge, just using one's own inherent capabilities to create magic.
I mean, I'm with it. It basically sounds like you're stripping things down. In my mind, you're stripping things down purely to technique. And in that regard, like the technique is almost irrelevant because it doesn't matter what you do as long as you believe that it's working.
Right, and that's where we get back towards the beginning, where you have to have confidence in your faith that it'll work.
Yeah.
Like, if you just fucking do whatever because, you know, you read somewhere, oh, this should work, if you don't fully believe that it's going to, it won't. But, like, it could be as dumb and ridiculous as you want it to be, as long as you have that faith in your own abilities and you have that confidence, then it will, regardless of how absolutely dumb it is.
I feel like I feel like with non-paradigmal, it's weird because so many people start out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you start out doing something that is disconnected from whatever it is you believe in or believed in, you know, as a child, and you start out just doing that thing, and you don't believe in it in the context of, you know, I grew up in a Christian household. I didn't believe in magic in the context of Christianity. And so whatever the thing is that I'm doing is inherently this kind of or at least a paradigmal thing that, like, whatever the thing is that I'm calling on, I don't really care about. I just care about the result, and I care about the thing working, right?
Yeah. And as far as that goes, like, it could even, like, some of the things that I've worked with since have been, and it's not just about technique either. It's also about, like, creating sort of thought forms or servitors or whatever, and it can be completely off the cuff. So, like, say you're just in your apartment or some shit, and then, like, every time at, like, a weird hour, there's this, like, knocking or ticking noise in your walls. Well, that is now your fucking protective entity of your house, and that's it communicating with you. All is well. And so now you have established this thing as being an entity, and it becomes that entity as long as you continue to believe in it, and as long as you continue to feed it with your own thoughts.
Okay, so it's basically like, that seems a little yes-andy, where you're just kind of like yes-anding yourself into a belief structure, which is totally valid.
Oh, no, yeah.
It's a thing that's basically what you do starting out in magic. You just yes-and yourself into being a magician.
Mm-hmm.
You fucking fake it until it works.
Right. And, yeah, and so essentially, I guess you could say that for the past, like, 10 years or so, it's like, I've been working in this very basic thing and trying to evolve and define this very basic practice, concept, whatever. And I refuse to go into paradigms because, oh, they're more established and more advanced magicians work this. Fuck you. Fuck you. If I'm good at this one thing, it's going to be fucking great.
I think it also comes down to this thing of, like, all right, so if you're working in a pre-established paradigm, you are then, to some degree, taking on the baggage that comes with it, right?
Oh, totally, yeah.
Whereas if you just make your own shit, like, you decide what the baggage is. And it works if you stick with it, and it works because you stick with it.
And actually,
like,
yeah, that actually does have some, like, benefits and shit, too. Because, like, you look at some other paradigms, and you've got god forms or whatever that have correspondences and, or whatever of shit that you don't need. So, like, take, for example, like, Norse mythology, right? So you've got Odin, who's, like, god of war and knowledge and whatever, but he's also the god of poetry. No, fuck that. I don't need poetry. I just want to fucking one-eyed bastard this shit into place. Make your own that doesn't have correspondences that aren't working for you. Create your pantheon that has elements that only you need. You don't need any of the extra bullshit.
Yeah, and it works in a way that's like, you can define it to yourself so much easier. And even if you don't, like, you don't necessarily have to define it to somebody else, and it doesn't really matter, right? Because it's a thing that you're using, right? Or your temple is using, or whatever the fuck, right? You don't necessarily have to then have all of this shit attached to it. I think that there's a lot of crossover between the occult and like neo-paganism. To the point where I feel like a lot of occultists feel like they have to like have some kind of like paganistic worldview of like all of these different like thousands of gods that they believe in. You really don't. You kind of just need like fucking your own will.
Yeah. Right, and like, yeah, because I mean, with the whole neo-paganism thing, like almost every person who I've met who's called themselves a neo-pagan or like an eclectic witch, they're basically just a chaos magician. They just don't want to use the term chaos magician.
Well, and it's also a thing where like the big difference between like an eclectic witch and a chaos magician is a chaos magician can put something down.
Yeah.
Like, a chaos magician can be like, okay, fuck it, this isn't working for me anymore. Fuck him, he lost. I don't need a loser, right?
Right. You gotta hedge your bets, man.
Yeah, and it's like, that's a thing that I feel like people are very uncomfortable with when it comes to, you know, self-identifying as a chaos magician. Is you are then, like, and it kind of goes with what we're talking about right now, because you're then lumping yourself in with all the baggage that comes with being a chaos magician.
Right. Well, there's that, and there's also, like, it comes from the whole confidence thing, too. Because, like, say, okay, you had mentioned you don't want a loser. And there's a lot of times that you could work within a certain paradigm or whatever, and, like, that entity didn't do well with you. And, like, you didn't do shit properly or whatever, and so you're afraid, like, well, I just didn't do it right, and it didn't work within what I wanted. Well, this isn't, I'm just like not confident in my own shit within this paradigm, as opposed to like, no, fuck that guy, I'm done with it. Like, he didn't work, like, he didn't do what I needed. So it's a whole like confidence thing where like you're not confident in your own abilities within a particular paradigm. So like, say if you're working within voodoo or some shit and you are working with Iazon as the goddess of the marketplace or whatever, and you have a small business, and then this whole corona thing happened and now your business has to close, and you're just like, well, my voodoo just didn't work well, voodoo doesn't work for me, and there's all of this past baggage, and like, I'm not exactly part of the culture where voodoo stems from, so it doesn't click with me. You could just say, like, have the confidence level, no, I'm good at what I do, and that bitch sucked.
True. I also feel like you can come at it the other way, right? Where, like, a pagan or a witch or whatever, well, it just wasn't the will of the god that my business take off.
Yeah.
Right? It just wasn't, you know, I didn't do the thing at the planetary hour, and I didn't, you know, whatever, and it just wasn't in the cards for me. Whereas if you're doing things like non-paradigmal or whatever, you can look at it and be like, well, I made this and it didn't work because something here was fucked up. What can I change?
Right.
What can I do differently? What can I tweak? What can I iterate on to make this work better?
Yeah, and like with other paradigms, the correspondences and all of that shit is very, very well established. And so like, it does take a lot more work to do the whole non-paradigmal thing, because like, you could say that your work with whatever entity didn't go well because their preferred hour is like the planetary hour of Jupiter, and you didn't do shit within Jupiter. Well, if you're building your own, you have to figure out why it didn't work. you have to understand, like, okay, well, these are the things I need to change for it to work. You have to build the correspondences. You have to build all those tables. You have to figure out what that deity needs. You have to do all of the work. It's hard.
It is. And it seems very basic because it's, you know what it's actually a lot like? It's like someone jumping into being a dungeon master for the first time.
Yeah.
Like, everybody has that horror story. Everybody has that horror story of the first time they wanted to DM a campaign, and then they got in way the fuck over their heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems very easy on, on its face. It seems very like, oh, well, I read the book, and all you really have to do is roll the dice and fucking make a thing up, right? But there's a lot more to it.
Well, yeah, like, yes, and it goes back, you have to have confidence in your own abilities, and not, like, you have to rely on yourself. So, like, taking that, whole analogy and pushing it further, relying upon your own abilities rather than sitting there with the Dungeon Master's Guide and while everyone's asking you questions, just holding up the whole fucking campaign because you can't find the one goddamn chart in the book that tells you how many hit points this one fucking weapon's worth. Fuck it. Just make it up. Like, it's about the story, damn it. It's about how shit unfolds.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people kind of, you come to realize with Magick, right? Magick becomes a lot less about the result. Like, the result is still a thing, right? Like, results magic is still a thing.
Yeah.
But it becomes less about that and more about the process. And I find that something that you do and make on your own is something that is, like, way more, you tend to take way more care of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If it's something that you put the work into.
Yeah. But and yeah, it goes back to, like, your own capabilities, and, like, unless you have that confidence and that faith in your own ability as a magician, you're not going to take off with non-paradigmal magic at all, because you have to, like, why did you do that? Well, because it felt right. Well, why did it well, it just did, and it worked, so fuck you. Not just, like, as opposed to, well, it felt right. Yeah, but your shit still went to hell. Yeah, I know. Ugh. I mean, figure your shit out.
Yeah, and you kind of have to be able to, take your ego out of the equation, like, altogether, and look at, like, the things that you actually did, and, like, oh, well, maybe this worked because I actually did kind of just shortchange it. Like, I didn't really put the fucking effort into something, right? Like,
right.
maybe this servitor isn't doing shit because I'm not actually really doing anything with it.
Yeah, it could, and I'm guilty of doing this before, is, like, creating a servitor and expecting it to work for me, but then, like, not really doing anything with it in the interim.
Yeah, you're not spending time, like, establishing that connection, and so it's not going to work because it's just a weird, wonky drawing that you did.
Yeah. You've got this, like, fucking thing carved into a candle or drawn on a piece of paper that you see every day, but it's like, oh, yeah, I did that at one point, but I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm not going to put in the work and figure out, like, what this entity needs, what it wants, and all of the established things so that way it can actually thrive and do shit for me.
Yeah, and that's something we'll get into a little bit later in the episode, with the system that we've all been kind of working on building ourselves, and kind of how that's been going. But I'm going to shelve that for now. We'll come back to it a little later. I'm interested right now in talking about kind of some very basic things for non-paradigmal magic. In as far as, like, something concrete that you can nail down that isn't us just kind of talking in circles about, like, confidence and whatever. Like, non-paradigmal magic is very much a thing that you do on your own, and I find, at least starting out, it's something where the things that get pulled in out of necessity.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so you have this idea that you don't want to lose a pen, right? And so in order to like really facilitate that, you decide to make that your pen that you're using for Magick. And you decide like, okay, I know that this is the pen that I'm using for Magick because I always put it in my left coat pocket. That's where my Magick pen is. There's nothing there that's telling you like, okay, this is, a sacred pen in a sacred pocket. You just put it there because you don't want to lose it. But by doing so, it now becomes, that's the pen I use for this because that's where it's always at, right?
Right.
It's something that it's born kind of out of this necessity. And it's something that like, that's something non-paradigmal that people do all the time.
Mm-hmm. It's... We use the term non-paradigmal more as a blanket term in order to cover shit that works, that doesn't have, like, any prior baggage to it, really. So, like, with the not losing shit example, like, or, like, leaving notes for yourself or something to remember things, or, like, creating... in the very basic sense, what a ritual is. So, like, waking up in the morning and, taking a shower, brushing your teeth. Why? Well, because otherwise I feel like shit. That's a ritual, and the outcome is not feeling like shit.
Yeah, and you don't smell like shit. And also you get to keep your teeth a little longer.
Yeah.
Which is, like, really cool, because I like to use my teeth for all sorts of things.
Yeah, but you've got so many of them.
Yeah, but I need them all so that I can
though?
have them. So I can have them. It's not like money. It doesn't recirculate into the economy.
No, but you can bend and fold to your new reality of hardening your gums to bite through bone.
No.
Oh, well.
I'm just going to stop that. I'm stopping that train of thought right there.
All right, well.
It's just not going anywhere.
But, I mean, essentially, like, all of this really appealed to me when I originally started it, was, like, taking from the creepypastas and shit, like, because I've mentioned several times before my affinity towards, like, ceremonial magic and shit, and, the thing that always appealed to me was how, like, some of these creepypastas were just so fucking intricate, and it never really gave, like, an explanation for why you were doing things, or whatever, or why it was incorporated. You just did them, because that's what it required. And so the ceremonial magician in me was just like, fuck yeah! This is awesome! I need all of these components, and I need to do all of these weird things to make this shit happen. And so, like, that was one thing that in any of the non-paradigmal shit that I'd done since, I had thrown in a lot of superfluous shit just to, like, alter my own belief system and strengthen it. Just like, no, I need all of these different components together in order to make something. And yeah, sure, they're arbitrary and it doesn't make sense, but some weird shit comes out of it, so I'm gonna stick with that.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but it works, so fuck it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question? Like, what do you guys think? Because you talked earlier about belief.
Yeah.
And the necessity of, like, you gotta believe it for it to work. And, in your example, Yara, with the, creepypastas and stuff, I mean, do you have any advice on how you get yourself into a headspace of really believing something like that? I mean, I would find that from my work that, like, non-paradigmal is somewhat easier to believe than paradigmal things, probably because of the baggage.
Yeah.
Like that they were talking about earlier. And I don't know, somehow it's easier. Like, if it's something you build yourself and you put all your own meaning stacked into it, it's, like, easier to believe in. So I guess coming back around, it's like, if you want to work with something and you're not certain how much you believe in it, I mean, other than fake it till you make it, is there any other...
For me personally, one of the things that I did, like, I'm a spooky kid. I like spooky shit. Like, hence this kind of starting with creepypastas and shit. To put me in a certain headspace, there are there are things that I would do that put me in things. It's kind of like the whole concept of like you do a banishing to like put you in the headspace that, yeah, we're doing magic now. Certain aspects of how I would work it would be like doing it at night, first of all. Like, this shit happens at night. Magic happens at night. It's dark. It's spooky. Making things as spooky as possible. So, like having, like, dark ambient music playing in the background. Other things would be, and this happens a lot in some of these, like, creepypasta rituals, is the concept of putting yourself in a hypnagogic state, or at least as close to one as possible. So, like, what you would do is, like, for the Four Sages ritual that I talked about earlier, one of the components to it was you set everything up, and the ritual needed to be done between, like, 1 and 3, it needed to be done at, like, 3 or 4 in the morning. But in order to set yourself up for it, you went to bed at, like, you had to go to bed before midnight, and then once midnight rolled around, you set an alarm, and then once that alarm went off, you got up and went and did it. So you're still in that sleepy, groggy state where reality and fantasy are just kind of blended together, where if you just slightly close your eyes because you're still partially asleep, you'll definitely see shades from the corner of your eyes. Just the whole putting myself in a specific mindset is, like, getting the spooky shit. And so, like, you could go at night to a cemetery, which, yeah, that's fun. Do that with, like, a fucking lantern and just, like, imagine yourself as, like, a gravedigger. And you're going to dig up a grave, which, dude, whatever. If that's, like, if you're talking about, like, some ancestor veneration or whatever, or working with the dead in a non-paradigmal way, imagining yourself as a gravedigger, and you're going to go dig up the graves at 2 a.m. with a fucking oil lantern, walking through a cemetery on a fucking cloudy night, that's a good way to put yourself into a specific mindset.
I would add to that drugs.
Yeah, that works too.
Not really.
Yeah, they're always helpful, I guess.
Not really. I mean, like, you do what you do. But, like, one of the things that I think helps a lot with that is creating positive feedback loops, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it starts out really hokey, right? And it starts out really kind of cheesy of, like, you do a sigil of, like, I'm going to drink coffee tomorrow. Well, you're completely in control of that. You wake up and make a fucking pot of coffee, and now you're going to drink coffee, right?
Yeah.
But then you have to tell yourself, this happened because I did a thing last night that said I was going to drink coffee tomorrow. And then you start small, and you start working your way up to these things, and you create this positive feedback loop combined with taking credit for things, no matter how arbitrary or small. And you start to, like, I forget whose idea it was, where they're talking about wealth magic. And you start with, like, you manifest a quarter. And then you'll eventually find a quarter in your pocket somewhere when you're doing laundry. And then you incrementally work your way up. Well, now I'm going to manifest $1. Now I'm going to manifest $5. And it doesn't go on like that forever, but through doing that, you create this process by which you can take credit for things. And you can build your confidence as a practitioner that you're doing these things and they're working because you're doing the magic for it.
Gotcha, that makes sense.
So, like, yeah, and for me in particular, like building the whole mindset of we're doing magic now is extremely important. So, like, recently, I had created a talisman for myself that worked phenomenally, and part of the whole process is that when I make talismans, I do acid etching, and so, like, that takes time to do, because I made it out of copper, and the ferric chloride needs to eat through the copper and all of that shit, and so in that hour or two that shit was building, I had the entire time to just focus my intent on that. And set everything up in a certain way that mindset was made concrete. Another way that I do that is like if I recently went to go grab some of my paternal grandmother's grave dirt, right? And I haven't been to her graveside in about, 18 years. She was buried in 2002. I haven't been there since then, and so I walked all the way to the cemetery, but in the interim, the entire time I was walking there, I had like this occult playlist going that just put me in a mindset that what I'm doing is going to be magical, what I'm doing is going to be effective in the whole gathering of the dirt, because there's a whole goddamn ritual in the paradigm that I'm working in with gathering grave dirt, and Dreadnought knows about this.
It is a motherfucker.
Yeah. And so, like, going there to go do this, like, it all worked out perfectly, and it was spooky as fuck. Like, some weird shit happened that night, but part of the reason that was the entire, like, hour I walked to this cemetery, I was listening to a playlist that put me in that mindset.
It's kind of like, it's the same as, like, when you, like, do stretches before you work out, right? Part of the reason you do your stretches is you get your body there, but it also gets your mind there where you get into that mindset. I would say another thing, and it comes back to being a very basic, like, one of the basic practices of Western occultism and occultism in general, meditation. Like, meditation is such an important thing to have, and it can be a non-traditional thing, right? I used to meditate when I worked at a factory. I used to meditate like I wasn't sitting down, in half lotus with a universal mudra and Om. I was leaning on a railing, staring at my equipment, making sure it didn't break, but I also was working on like, okay, I'm going to focus on this particular switch and concentrate on controlling my breathing.
Oh yeah, and that shit's easy when it's like the same repetitive sounds over and over and over again too. Like it puts you in that state really quickly.
I think another thing, like something that works for me a lot is repetition. So, when I'm writing out an incantation or an affirmation or something that I know works for me a lot is repeating things. So when I write a thing out, it's often repeated a certain amount of times, or you just keep repeating the same thing over and over and over and over again, because eventually you just get lost in the, cadence and the rhythm of what it is that you're saying. And like your brain kind of goes to that, like that other place where you are kind of lost in that moment, right? The words stop being words and it's just the sounds that you're making. And that kind of taps into your more like different cognitive functions,
Yeah, and like that's another thing that through my non-paradigmal research and everything, it was looking into scientific methodology for changing mind states. So like I had mentioned, the whole hypnagogic state, there was a lot of research that was done into that shit with like surrealism back in the 20s and 30s. That I would still utilize. So like Dolly getting exhausted and falling asleep in a chair, but having like a bell in his hand, so when he dropped it and it hit the floor, he immediately woke up, putting him in that state in between alertness and dreaming. Lots of like actual, I mean, I don't want to say they're not magical techniques, but they are, but like scientifically grounded psychological states and different methods of doing so. Like another method that I had done work with was the whole Gonzfeld Effect. The Gonzfeld Effect it happens when you deprive yourself of sensory input. And so like you can do it on the cheap at home by like how I did it is you take a ping pong ball and you cut it in half, and then you use masking tape and tape those halves over your eyes, shine a red light on your face, so that this way, like, it's really difficult for you to tell the difference between your eyes being open and eyes being closed, but because that light is still there, it doesn't put you in like a, oh, I'm sleeping now kind of state. And then you have headphones on that are playing nothing but white noise. You lay there in death pose and try to just lose sense of what, like, if you had a float tank, that'd be a hell of a lot easier. But in lieu of that, you just lay in bed in death pose, and eventually, like, your mind just gets so fucking bored that it starts making shit up. You'll start hearing things, you'll start seeing things, and this is a well-established thing, and it's an established method of altering one's conscious state. So doing shit like that and looking into other psychonautic things in order to change how you approach your ritual or whatever, or blending it in with the ritual.
It's the same concept of basically doing like wake back to sleep method for lucid dreaming, right? Where you're trying to create that different state of not quite being awake, not really being asleep. You do things like that to try and I don't even know how we got on this rant, I'm going to be honest. But
sorry, I asked a question and you guys never stopped answering it.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Well, at any point during us just kind of screaming shit, was there an answer that was like satisfactory, or do we?
Yeah,
suck
I think
at
there's
this?
a lot of good ideas there, because I was basically asking, like, getting yourself into a belief state and how that had to do with non-paradigmal stuff. Is I feel like the non-paradigmal for me has been like easier to just believe because it's all my own associations going into things rather than like believing in Odin or, you know, Egyptian gods or things like that, which I find harder, maybe just because of, you know, the long amount of skepticism of my past, you know. I find it hard to sometimes get into paradigms and feel like I'm believing it.
Well, the other thing with that comes along is, like, at a certain point, you start dealing with, you know, god forms that have been around for so long that they've been twisted and turned into a million fucking different things.
Yeah.
Like,
well, there's also, like, the shit that's happened within the last, like, you know, 5 years or so, like the twisting of the Egyptian god Kek.
Yeah.
So, like, that whole thing happened, which, so you had this god of chaos or whatever that had been taken by the alt-right and put to their own means, and so this entity no longer really has its original concept, because if you've read the book American Gods and all of the thought that goes into a fucking god or whatever, and so with the god Kek, thousands of years no one thinks about Kek at all, and then all of a sudden the people who were thinking about Kek are like fucking Richard Spencer and shit. So now, like, it's been appropriated to some fucked up use that now nobody can work with that god unless you want some fucking bullshit attached to it that you do not want.
Well, and I think the much more mundane version of that is if you look at, like, most modern, like, interpretations of Hecate. Like,
yeah,
there are so many, like, fucking eclectic witch covens or whatever the fuck that, like, oh, well, Hecate is a goddess of magic and witchcraft and will do things to help. Like, she's also, like, traditionally a psychopomp and like, chthonic goddess that will fucking take you to the death realm and leave you there. But nobody cares. Like, it's become so muddied and vague, and, like, all these god forms do everything, and it's like, fuck it, I'm gonna make a thing that does the thing that I want and nothing else.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, I'm gonna make a servitor that helps me find my car keys when I lose them, and that's it.
Right.
And it also becomes a thing by making your own thing, right? And whether or not you choose to share it with, your fellow practitioners or community or whatever, it then will not be sullied and generalized and turned into like, well, okay, but it finds your car keys, but it also helped me find my pizza cutter when I really wanted to cut up that Jack's pizza that I couldn't find one, so I did that, and he helped. So now he finds car keys and pizza cutters. Oh, well, do you think you'll help me find my cat litter scoop? Because I need that, and I'm pretty sure I had it over here. Like, and suddenly, okay, now it just finds things, and you're like, okay, well, will it help me find a new job? And suddenly, all of this shit gets put on. It's like pork barrel legislature, really. Like, whereas if I just make a thing that helps me find my car keys, and fuck you, you don't need to know its name, and you don't need to know its sigil, and you don't need to know any of that shit, it still works to do that for me, and it serves that one very specific purpose.
Right, and that's why, like, some of the things that I've created as far as, like, servitors or whatever, they are so fucking specific that there's no ambiguity towards its direction whatsoever. Like, and like giving it a name that directly reflects what its purpose is, giving it a sigil that gives no doubt in your mind. Yeah, that's what it's for, because its sigil looks like a pair of fucking car keys.
Yeah. Like those things are you make shit and like it becomes this thing where it's hard to get lost in it because you made the thing, right? So where like now the waters aren't so fucking muddied with reading, well, this book says that Hecate does this stuff, but this book says that Hecate does this or likes this or is only available through these means. Like, who cares? It doesn't matter if I made my own thing. But that also circles back around to, you have to be able to be confident enough in your ability to create a servitor that you can do that.
Yeah, because, like, part of the reason why god forms and egregores are so efficacious is because there's so much more energy put behind it. There's much more thought and direction given to it that it becomes more effective.
Yeah, part of the reason that, like, God as a god form is so powerful is because there are so many people that believe in God.
So, yeah, you've got to... I mean, on one point, like, yeah, I'm fine, and I totally am... I recommend sharing your creations with other people. However, in the creation of it, I would suggest making it so unambiguously specific that it can't be fucked with otherwise, and understand that the people that you are working with must also get the point, yeah, this is a whole non-paradigmal thing, and it's going to be as specific as possible, and if you fuck with it, I'm going to hunt you down and punch you in the neck. I did a lot of work for this, and you're not turning this into fucking Saint Expedite.
Right? It's just a matter of being able to, like, work with people that you trust, right? When you're doing something that specific. And I think that it's something where, like, it behooves you as a practitioner to be comfortable working on your own. If something is so specific and so, like, of such a degree that you don't want it fucked with at all, you need to be able to be confident enough to make something on your own. There's a time and a place for group magic, I think. But I think there's also a time and a place to be able to do something completely on your own for yourself.
Which I think is important, because a lot of the people that we've spoken to, like our listeners and whatever, have come from a point where, like, group magic is hard for them. Because a lot of the people who are, like, just now beginning or have just recently started their own path don't know other spooky weirdos that do the same shit. And it's, up until this point, has been a very solo practice. And it's important to get your own grounding before you start working with groups and understanding your own capabilities and everything. But I can understand at the same time people who have joined our community who don't have that group outlet, who are like, no, I want to do this and this and this. It's like, yes, but there are still restrictions with the whole non-paradigmal thing. Like, if I create something, don't fuck with it. Like, it's not that hard. Like, if I were to create like a piece of artwork, there's a goddamn copyright on it. Don't just start selling your shit with my shit on it.
So it just doesn't seem like a thing you'd have to write down.
No, but you do though, because some people are just like, rules? Fuck those.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of like that.
Yeah. Don't do this creepypasta, Yara.
Yeah,
and if you do it and don't do it, definitely don't face south when you do it.
Yeah, but it did. Yeah, so I'm kind of just eating my own foot right there.
Well, I think it comes down to, like, if you're going to share something, you need to be cognizant of the fact that the thing that you share is inherently going to have it's going to change as you share it.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's like you had mentioned, the whole concept of, like, work with people you trust. So if you're going to share it with people who, like, you have a bond with, or who would respect your wishes of not turning your servitor into Saint Expedite.
I think this is a good place to get our first break in. And then when we come back, we can talk a little bit about the non-paradigmal system that we've been working on creating for, like, the past month or so.
Woo.
So, yeah, let's do that. We will be back in just a little bit.
Today's episode is sponsored in part by Welcome to Paradise. Founded on the principle that ritual and occult items are best when vetted and created by actual practitioners, Welcome to Paradise provides a place for magical artists to showcase their tools and art to those in search of them. Aiming toward total inclusiveness, they carry items from paradigms like Wicca, Left Hand Path, and Voodoo, and are always looking for more artists to diversify their ranks. So, whether you're a magician looking for a new piece to help your practice, or a venue to finally display your occult artwork to the world, Welcome to Paradise wants you to join their growing community. All you have to do is go to welcometoparadise.com.
All right, so yeah, that was a thing, and now we're back, and here we are. And now I want to talk a little bit about the system of magic that we've been developing for, kind of like since the beginning of the year, little earlier.
Something like that, yeah.
We've been working on it for the last few months, and we've kind of, like, we have the very basics set down for it, and it's a non-paradigmal system of magic that is available on our Discord server, and I think on our Facebook page.
Yeah,
maybe?
I mean, at least the
Yeah, I think you posted the earlier one anyways.
Yeah, I know the PDF that we put up is. Yeah.
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 So what we've done in the spirit of creating your own thing is we have created these 8 egregores, which are based on the 8 colors of magic. Yep. And the idea with the system of magic is that people then use those to create their own servitors from those that represent the 8 colors of magic.
Yeah, so in essence, we just kind of created, like, our own faith blind pantheon, sort of. So
kind of. I mean, they're more like archetypes, though. Really,
yeah,
there's not like
yeah.
It's just kind of like a thing of making, like, you know, you make a sigil and then people look at the sigil and then they make their own sigil after looking at that sigil for long enough, right? Yeah. And realistically, what it is like going back to Cologne, what you had said earlier about it being hard to get started, right? It was kind of like just making a kickstart of like, okay, here's a thing you can use to start making your own whatever, right? Your own set of servitors or whatever. And the idea behind making your own servitors goes back to what we were talking about right before the break of making something that's your own and isn't like been completely generalized into being pointless, right? You make your own shit that is very specific to what your purpose and your what's the word I'm looking for here? Your interpretation of that color.
Right, and like we've had quite a lot of positive reports on it. Like I know there was this one user who would okay, so we have it created on the 8 colors, and you just choose whichever one you want to fucking work with. But how I had originally thought of how we would do it is like we create these like egregores based on the 8 colors, and then you create servitors with very specific like facets in response to the egregores. So like with death magic, like one person or like a person could create a servitor that is just focused on mourning and how to cope with that, or how to or another servitor that is based on the concept of transition through death and that kind of shit. But we had one person who was working with yellow, with ego, and like since working with it, not only did they say that like their entire practice has been revitalized because this came from a new space where it was just their own creation, but they've also gone through like a with the whole concept of ego, they've gone through this whole like fucking existential upheaval that has like guided them through their practice. So, bonus.
So we did that, I guess. That's good. Maybe. I don't know. But I've found like working through it, like, and that's basically the I guess the closest thing I could say that we're at as far as a stage is like kind of like alpha testing right now.
Yeah.
Where we have the concept, we have the ritual written out, and now it's a matter of going through and doing this ritual, right? Yep. And what I found doing it is that it is no less effective than, you know, using some, you know, pre-existing god form that would be representative of death or war or wealth or whatever.
Oh, right. No, like we'd taken the ritual and just like stripped it down fucking bare bones of shit. So like there's nothing but your own interpretation, nothing but your own creativity, your own essence is going into it. Like there's no outside influence at all, which works really, really well for the fact that like, no, you're not dealing with any other god form. This is all coming from you and your interaction with the egregore.
Right. And what the egregores are really, they're just focusing, like focal points for the colors themselves.
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of like guideposts.
It's like a mask, right? It's a thing you put on it so you're not just staring at a yellow card.
Yeah.
But you could just as easily just stare at a yellow painting or a red whatever, right? Like, you could just do that. The only reason we made the egregores is just because, hey, makes it feel more spooky and magical.
Yeah.
Fuck it.
Right.
It worked for me.
Right. And, well, I mean, that, and there's the whole thing that, like, we created this thing as kind of like a group experiment. So like it was us creating something that we could share with our listeners and everything. That's just like, okay, well, here's this, and here's an object that we are presenting with you. Play around with it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and it's a thing that's like very simple to just kind of like, all right, I'm having trouble finding inspiration for doing something. Like, oh, here you go. Stare at this thing for a little bit.
Yeah.
Right?
Which, yeah, kind of like that one dude who said, like, it had inspired his practice. Because, like, it was the fact that we had laid out in the thing, like, okay, these are the methods by which one can create their own servitor and everything, as opposed to, like, vague guidelines of like, oh, here are all the many, many things you can do. We have our own system, like, okay, this is what we're doing, and we have these colors, and your job is to create a servitor based on that and work with the color, work with the egregore. That's what you're doing. It's much more directed than the kind of nebulous, like, we're teaching chaos magic and the possibilities are infinite.
Yeah, and like through doing it, what my hope with writing it was very much to like show people what an example of doing something like this, like laying out a ritual, would be, right? Because you see a lot of times people talk about like, oh, well, a ritual needs to involve these components and it needs to do this, and otherwise you're kind of free to do what you want, and it's really easy to get overwhelmed and lost by that.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, what we did was lay out, okay, there are a bunch of ways that you can make servitors. This is an example ritual that I've used effectively to make one before.
Right, and hell, even the creation of the egregores themselves was done by all three of us, and it was done in a method that was very fucking bare bones, simple, and had worked for us tremendously in the past. I mean, shit, that's how we created Skefuckle.
That very much is. And it's a thing that, like, it doesn't have to be dressed up, right? It's not a thing where you have to, and if you choose to, you absolutely can. But like, I've never been, like, personally, I've never been a person that thinks like, okay, magic needs to be sufficiently dressed up in order to work.
Right.
It works because you believe in it, and if you have to dress it up to believe in it, then okay, cool. But like, personally, I don't.
Right. And on our server, we give the opportunity, like, if you've created a servitor and whatever, and you want to share it, you can go ahead and like lay out if it's a bit more complicated than just like, yeah, all you have to do is just like huck this cactus up into a ceiling fan and he's evoked. Like, you can share that. If it's a bit more than that, you can share out all the components to that servitor that you've like created so that other people can work with them if you so choose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would, despite what I've said earlier, even on this episode, like, I encourage people, if you feel like you want to share your shit, like, share your shit. There's, and there's also no rule saying you can't make more than one servitor. Like, fuck it. Who cares? Make a bunch of them. I don't give a shit. Make as many as you want. Like, who gives a fuck, really?
Right. It's like, I had a conversation with someone earlier this morning, in regards to like the colors of magic and everything, and it was talking about like high magic, and they're like wanting to progress themselves spiritually and whatnot. I'm like, yeah, you could always work with fucking high magic or octarine as reflected by the color, Skefuckle, which is the egregore for that one. And they were like, well, I thought you had mentioned, like, you don't want to work octarine or high magic until you've, like, worked with all the other ones. I'm like, fuck, do what you want. Like, I'm not here to tell you what to do. Like, we suggested it because that's how it worked for us. But if it don't work for you, fuck it, do it. I don't care. I'm not your dad.
Yeah, you start with octarine. Who gives a shit, right? Like, do whatever it is that you want to do or feel like you should do. The thing is, like, there's nothing in the rules that says you can't start at step 6.
There ain't no rules. Fuck your rules.
I don't know. It's like a DIY pantheon, kind of.
Yeah. It's like we're all working on creating this. Like, you know how the Greeks had thousands of years to fucking create this weird pantheon where Zeus goes around sticking his dick in whatever. Yeah, we're starting that. I mean, it might not be any different. There might be as many dick jokes. Who knows?
But we also have the benefit of the internet. So, like, we don't have to send a guy to, like, walk all the way to another ass city to start talking about shit. Like, we can just put it on the internet and then it's there.
Yeah. No, it's a project that I'm super excited for because, like I had said, it gives a kind of direction. But it's not a direction that's just like, okay, here's what you have to do. Here is what we are doing. You have to do this. Like, no, it's still like a choose your own adventure book. But
oh my god, I fucking hated those so goddamn much.
Do you not do you just like being told what to do?
No, I just don't like
Do you
having
not
to,
like fun and adventure?
No, I hate fun. Look at me.
Yeah, you look
I
like
hate
a
it.
truck.
You're
No, I
right.
read the same one over and over again. I don't know why. Like, I knew every ending and still read it over and over.
I hated them because, like, you check them out from the library and you only got it for a week, and then you had to sit there and fuck with it and fuck with it and fuck with it until you got the right ending, and you constantly had to flip back and forth between pages, and then my giant fucking meat claws, I'd rip a page, and then I was fucked because I had to try and tape it back together so the librarian wouldn't notice, but she didn't actually give a shit, but I didn't know that because I was like 7.
Wow, you've got some deep-seated book issues.
Yes! That's why I like having an e-reader. You can't rip the pages on an e-reader.
Fucking meat hands just ripping apart the books.
Can't help it, man. Can't help it. I am not built for finesse.
Or reading, apparently.
I know my eyes are going to shit. It's awful.
Yeah.
So I started working on this, working through the system myself at like the beginning of April.
Yeah.
And the way that I've been doing it is basically to iterate through all of the colors and do the ritual all of the times will take somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, because you've got like you focus on one color for like a week to create a servitor for per color.
yeah, and basically what it is like the 6 days I'm just kind of doing meditation and contemplating like, okay, what does this color mean to me? Like what are the things that like I associate with thinking magic, right?
Yeah.
And then I have like a list of those things, and then on the last day is when I actually do the ritual to make the servitor, right? It doesn't have to take that long, and it doesn't have it could take longer if you want it to. But the idea is by contemplating and thinking about each color for a week, you get an idea of what it means specifically to you.
Yeah.
So that you can create that like hyper personalized servitor instead of just being like, oh, wealth, money, I have a money servitor. Like that. No, you think about it for long enough, you'll start to see like, well, what does this actually mean to me? And then you make a servitor to help you with that.
Yeah,
right?
like you create your own, like, I need $5 for a fucking Little Caesars pizza servitor.
Yeah. And that's specifically what it's for. It's not for a $5 footlong.
No, those don't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's not for that. It's for a $5 Little Caesars. That's like 98% bread.
It's not even bread. It's mostly just,
Cardboard and corn syrup.
yeah, it's reconstituted cellulose, mostly.
Right. You know, whatever the fuck. You just make that thing.
Yeah.
But that's a thing that I've been really excited to kind of fuck with, I guess, for lack of a better term, because like it's one thing to sit there and like write something out and like write out a ritual, right? But then you get to actually do it, and that's the really fun part.
Yeah. See, for me, with the whole non-paradigmal thing, when I first started, like, with the Sages of Four and doing that, like, part of the excitement, like, yes, it was to contact lost egregores, but half of the fun was the fact of going through all this giant fucking ritual and finding a fucking grab bag of what's gonna come out next.
Yeah, and like part of the fun of doing something like that, where it's not necessarily something that you've built, but it's something that you've found, I would imagine, is finding out what it's for.
Yeah. Like, it took a lot of research and whatever, but, like, the most fun for me was, like, when I finally made contact with something, and, like, it'd show up and it's like, who are you, buddy? Let's find out what you are. But, I mean, like, they were egregores, but half the time they were fucking useless, and I couldn't do anything with them, but...
Well, yeah, I mean, they're forgotten, which means they probably either A, didn't serve their purpose.
No.
Well, they probably...
Because through my research, it was, like, dependent upon, like, which direction you faced was how the egregore was lost, and some of the times it was like, well, they didn't serve their purpose well enough, or they did serve their purpose, and so after that, the magician just stopped giving a shit about them.
Mm.
Or, like, in one case, or if you face south, and the reason they're like, oh, don't ever face south, was the magician had died before the servitor or egregore could complete its mission, and so it was just sad, angry, in just impotent rage that it couldn't do its job. Kind of like the fucking Meeseeks, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I just want to do my fucking job, but I can't do my job because the dude who made me doesn't exist anymore, and so it's just mad.
Yeah, you're stuck in this like constant loop of like trying to figure out like what it is. It's like sending out a packet and then you never get it back because the router's offline.
Exactly.
Like, that sounds awful, but for like a whole existence.
Yeah.
Ugh. Now I made myself mad.
Yeah, and that's why they're like, don't ever face south, because all of those ones were just like super angry. So, yeah, whatever. But like the fun part was like finding the, like, going, because through all of my time doing it, I never found out a way to like focus in on like how to grab an egregore that you would want to work with. It was just like you reach in and it's like, what are we grabbing next?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like using the claw machine.
Yeah.
But the box is all like spray painted black and you can't see the cool prizes. You just get one.
Yeah. you don't aim for anything. You just get, like, you might get a fucking watch. You might get like a crumpled up pack of cigarettes. Who knows?
You might get gonorrhea syphilitis.
And that's just something you have to deal with.
Yeah, now you just got it. You got the crud.
Which, yeah, and then you can incorporate, or you can very much incorporate this into the shit that we've put out, because if you're working with the egregore, you have the opportunity not only, like, you can focus on the creation of a servitor for a very specific purpose within that color, within that focus, but you could also just, like, work with the egregore and just, like, and the egregore just be like, well, here's what you get.
Yeah, you could do that. You could just ask for one and then get one.
Yeah. Who knows? Like, within fucking war magic, you could just, like, get the egregore of the guy that gives extra water to Italians during war so that they can boil pasta.
Is that a thing?
Probably.
Well, it is now. We've put it out there, and now it's a thought form that has been created. It's now a thing.
So, yeah, there's that egregore. If you're Italian and you need some extra water for your pasta, there's an egregore out there for you. Servitor, whatever. It's yours now.
Yeah, you figure out what you want to do with it, right?
Get some extra water. That's what you need to do. That's the only thing you can do with it.
It's the only purpose.
It gets
you
more
could
water.
name it Bobby Boucher, and it could be the water boy.
No, Bobby Boyardee.
So one thing that I've been doing, like right now, I'm basically just kind of like dick smashing through and getting the servitors, right? The next step is figuring out how to work with them, right? And that'll be kind of like the next thing, like the next like part of this whole project that we're working on.
So
right?
in saying that, figuring out like how to work with them, do the ones that you've created have a purpose then?
Yes, they have a purpose, but like I'm talking about like, so basically the next step after I make them will be making an altar for them.
Oh, okay.
And then like
figuring out like what they want and shit.
Yeah, like doing that part of it. Like the ones that I've made have all have very specific purposes, and very specific things that they work with. But basically, because I've been going through, it's just kind of like adding on. Like I have those servitors present as I make the new ones. Right?
Gotcha.
And then once I have them all together, it'll be a thing of like sitting down and being like, all right, this is, for lack of a better term, this is our board of directors.
Yeah. Let's
work together to, figure out what we're doing. And then it'll be like, making an altar, figuring out, okay, what day works best to do this on? What kind of offerings are going to work? what kind of music should I use? What kind of whatever, right? That'll be kind of like the next step.
Yeah.
I guess.
Figuring out, like, whether or not your servitor likes, like, fucking, for incense, just the smell of burnt hair.
Please no. Not that I have plenty of hair to burn, but I just don't want to.
Yeah, just fill your house with the smell of burnt hair.
That's a real great way for me to become homeless.
No, it's cool. You're doing it for magic. I'm sure people will understand.
No.
What are you doing?
I mean,
I'm just burning my back hair.
Don't worry about it. It's fine.
You at least shave it off first.
Nope.
No, my back is the offering plate. Oh God, that would be so awful. I don't know if I could do that to another person. That might be my limit.
Burning
I don't
hair?
know. I don't know if I could burn my back hair at somebody else.
At them.
I like the idea of just having
event towards them.
just having a fistful of hair that you set on fire and just chuck it at someone.
I burned this hair at you. So I'm interested. Have you guys started working with it at all, or like, is it still kind of just I'll figure it the fuck out at some point?
Yeah, I've been super fucking busy. I haven't really had time to recently, so.
Well, yeah, you're doing like a million different things.
Yeah.
Like it's a whole goddamn thing.
Yep.
Nope. I'm just lazy.
Well,
I appreciate your candor.
glad to see we're all dedicated.
Really,
to this.
I mean, it's the last few weeks have been a whole thing. So.
Oh no, it has indeed been a whole ass thing, which is why like there wasn't really an esatopical this month. Like shit has just been frankly fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
Like a lot of stuff has been happening, and like for me, I've just been in a position where like the silver lining is like, okay, I have a bunch of extra time to dedicate to doing weird fucking attic shit now. Like,
Yeah.
it's fine. But I'm really interested in like seeing what other people's experiences are, which has been like really cool to read about thus far on the Discord server.
Yeah, we've had quite a few people who've joined in on it and have given their experiences and are continuing to work with it and whatnot. And I'm hoping that by the end of this month, like I'll have, or by the end of next month, whatever. By the next episode, I am hopefully going to have had the time to work with it or work within it and create something.
It's a thing where it's funny because it doesn't seem very in depth, and then you start doing it and you're like, oh god, I have to sit down and do this again today. Like, but that's like for me, that's the thing that works. Like the repetition works for me.
Well, right. It's kind of like how we had talked at the beginning. Like the whole concept of non-paradigmal magic is just like very basic, just what people do. But what I've been focusing on and what we've been doing and all of this shit, like it's taking those techniques, taking that shit and just hyper focusing on them. And just like making it exponentially more material. Like there's much more to it than just the very basic like, oh well, here's what you do.
Yeah, and it's a thing of like, just because something's non-paradigmal and doesn't draw on all of this like crazy tradition does not mean that it can't be like just as involved.
Oh right, like you create your fucking servitor, give it all of the fucking correspondences, like, as a typical, like, godform or whatever. So, like, how, like, okay, the deity that I've been working with loves working with shit in the Saturnalian hours. So, make your servitor do something like that. Give it sacred numbers. Give it the kind of, like, offerings that it wants. Create your own mantra for it. Create, like, hell, if you're artistic if you're musical at all, create your own fucking hymn to that goddamn servitor. Do whatever you want with it. Like, make it like as complex as you want it to be.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to is ownership, right? Like, you pick how in depth you want it to be because it's your thing.
Right. Like, and that's like, the possibilities are fucking endless. Going back to one of our first episodes where we were talking about the difference between servitors and egregores, like the concept of like online with the fucking tulpa thing.
Yeah.
People have built personalities based around their thing. They have built like what they look like. You could do that. Fucking draw it up. If it's a human shaped thing, make it look like that. Draw it up if you have any artistic ability. I don't, so I don't.
That's why all of yours are stickmen.
Yep, at the very most.
I didn't say they were good stickmen.
No, it's just bad. But
they got wonky looking arms. They got spaghetti legs. The heads are just kind of like squidgy. It's a fucking mess.
Yeah, it's a stick figure thrown through a goddamn blender. But it like do what you want. Like if you want, like you can always like look towards other paradigms for influences to what you could add to it. So like how you had mentioned Hecate earlier, with Hecate being a psychopomp and having an affinity towards crossroads. You could do that with your servitor. Like my servitor has an affinity towards like fucking really liking bar soap.
Yeah. Or like my servitor really likes rivers, so I go work with it at a river.
Yeah.
Or whatever. You know, you can do those things. You can also like gain those things through talking about like hypnagogic states or whatever.
Yeah.
You can have those things be revealed to you through those like altered states of consciousness.
Right. Like look up, go do your research, figure out ways to alter your consciousness. There was a book that I had read a while ago. I think it was put out by the Disinfo Society, but it had mentioned like different ways to alter one's consciousness. I remember reading at one point, like just reading the book Finnegan's Wake out loud would just alter your consciousness in some weird way. So like figure out a way to like change your own mindset, and in that way like let your servitor speak to you. Like figure out what it wants, figure out what you need, throw shit at it, experiment.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm gonna say this is probably a good spot for us to get that last break in before we come back and do. We still haven't come up with a better word than assignments.
No, we still
quest.
That's good. That's better.
Send me on a quest.
Okay, yeah. So we'll come back and do that here in just a little bit. Also, if you are interested in checking out the system that we're building, it is available on our Discord server and on our Facebook page. And I think I'll look and see if I can do it, but I should be able to put it up on our website as well. So be on the lookout for that. It will be available. And it's also a thing that is like growing and changing and, whatever. So like the version of it that's out now might not be the one that's out in the future or whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyways, we're going to do another real quick break and we will be right back.
We would like to give a shout out to the Chaos Coven, or Church of Nothing. The Chaos Coven is a Chicago-based chaos magic working group led by Naya Ein and Ninov. They host workshops every third Saturday of the month from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Occult Bookstore in Chicago, Illinois. Considered by some to be the oldest spirit shop in the world. Each class is pay as thou wilt with a $15 suggested donation. You can find the Chaos Coven and the Occult Bookstore on Facebook or occultbookstore.com.
The Faith Blind Council would like to take this time to give a very heartfelt thank you to West of Hell.
At westofhell.com, you can find handmade occult artifacts, ranging from ritual leather masks, prayer beads, qliphothic mirrors, and other tools of the craft, some even made from human bone. Their resident artist, Curse Carter, creates these pieces with an anti-cosmic and adversarial intent. With years of experience in art forms like tattooing and leathercraft, if the tool you're looking for isn't offered, let them know. Commissions are always welcome. So go out and support West of Hell by visiting their website at westofhell.com. That's WESTOVHELL.com.
All right, so now it's time for quests, I guess we're going to call it. I'm cool with it. It'll be good. I'm with it.
Sounds even nerdier, though.
It definitely...
We were just making comparisons to fucking Magick and DMing. So
yeah, you're not wrong.
You're good.
It's totally fine. All right, so last episode we had spent talking about Gnosticism, and our challenges were related to that. My challenge was to find modern examples of luminaries.
Okay, can we start with the other one first?
Yeah, sure. I don't remember.
That was me opening. That was me opening the door for Yara to remember his, which he didn't do.
No, I didn't. So. Which is great because Cologne remembered it and wanted to start first. So, by all means.
Perfect. Let's do that one.
Basically wanted me to read the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No,
it was like finding apologists, whatever.
Just discussing Allegory, basically. Screwtape Letters. So, obviously, like, I read it a little bit later in the month after doing more Gnostic reading so that I could kind of bend and shift a few things into thinking about it from like a more Gnostic standpoint. So for those of you who are unaware of what the Screwtape Letters is about, it's basically an allegory where a demon's writing a series of letters to his nephew demon and giving him tips and stuff about how to turn a man away from God. Right? It would be the, basic premise, which they call the enemy, which I kind of love. I just like how throughout, like, the language is written in such a way. It's really easy to read. I read the whole thing in one day. It's not particularly long, but like I was really, just really enjoyed reading it. I hadn't read a lot of C.S. Lewis before. I'd read a little bit of his apologetics, and I tried reading the Chronicles of Narnia, but didn't find it very interesting. So.
Yeah, it was basically just a competition.
The premise
with
of this is just out of the gate kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
The idea that, and like through this, like you can tell C.S. Lewis is trying to tell us like how to live a better life and to be closer to God or the divine in some way. And I think there's a few ideas in it that definitely kind of mesh with some Gnostic ideas. And let's see, what's some ideas I've written down. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Like, the fact that you have written notes at all.
I wrote notes and it's still not going to make any sense. Like one is, man, it's hard to put into words because I was reading this thing and underlining things like crazy and just being like, oh yeah, like I see how that really like pulls into like the doctrines of like Gnosticism. So I have one note here to see if I can make any sense out of it. So it's the overuse of rationalism as separating man from God. So rationalism is not the same as reason. It's like an idea it brings up all the time. And I like this because like rationalism is just like rationalizing your own, like you can rationalize your own just bad decisions. You're just, whatever your mindset is, whatever it is you want, you can rationalize away. But reason is an entirely different method of actually understanding and interacting with the world rather than just rationalizing things. And
it's kind of like the before and after.
Well, I mean, like, the most, like, recognizable example of, like, people just rationalizing shit is the Nuremberg trials. Like, that was just people rationalizing, like, hey, I got a boss, I got a job I gotta do. Like, you were still doing awful fucking shit.
Yeah.
Find a different job.
Well, it's kind of like I said, the before and after. You rationalize what you had done after the fact, where with reason, you figure it out before you fucking do it.
Yes.
And also with reasoned ideas, you take in other information as well. You know, you aren't just trying to pad up preconceived notions and things.
Yeah.
Other things. This is actually this is easier to tie into Gnosticism. Here we go. The idea of like the differences between what is real life versus not real life. And like a lot of times the uncle will be telling them, you want your subject, which he always calls the subject the man that his nephew is trying to damn, I guess for lack of a better word, so they can feed on him, which is all kinds of great little details about how they're going to feed on souls and stuff.
Delicious.
And nourish themselves. Yes, delicious. And basically always associating real life with just ugliness and pain and bad things and just bare physical facts, rather than associating, quote unquote, real life with also the beauty and the joy and all the other good things. And like there's the bit of an one of the things he talks about in there is about how, getting people to think about philosophies not as philosophies, but just as like trends to follow, and one of the trends being very, intellectual, quote unquote, in a way in which, of course, just the gritty realness is what's real, the bad things, the pain. I mean, you see that actually in like movies today. Everybody wants gritty movies. That's what's real. But also things that are joyful and sometimes considered unsophisticated in their, what's the word I'm looking for?
Elegance?
Sentimental, like being overly sentimental, can be viewed as being, that's not real life. But we have to recognize the good is part of our world as much as the bad, and not to intellectualize it away as, like if you only see real life as just like that's the gritty realness, then you're going to be turned away from the fact that all of creation is part of real life, and that includes focusing on positives and joys and things like that.
Well, it also gets into with Gnosticism, the concept of like the Platonic allegory of the cave. And so when you're in the cave, you just see shadows of the real world, and it's that that's the false world that you live in, and it's nothing true whatsoever. But then once you realize the truth and everything, that's when true beauty shows itself. Yeah,
and I have to see all those aspects.
You can't spend too much time focusing on the grit and the grime and the disgusting, because otherwise you end up being Kurt Sutter, and you write Sons of Anarchy, and everybody likes it for some reason, but nobody really knows why, because it's just okay.
It is just okay. Thank you. Somebody said that. It's got Ron Perlman, so, I watched it. But
it's acceptable.
It's not terrible. It's just okay.
It's just, I would highly recommend reading it. It's very interesting.
It's got a very, in Screwtape Letters, C.S. Lewis has a really, sharp sense of humor.
Yes.
And, you don't see that so much in, the Chronicles of Narnia.
No.
It's there, but, Chronicles of Narnia was basically written for children.
Well, yeah. It was he'd written it about, if I remember correctly, he'd written it at about the same time as Tolkien was writing Lord of the Rings. And so it was just because those two were friends. They were very good friends, and they'd constantly talk about religion and whatever, but they both wrote these series together as kind of a friendly competition thing. It's I'm going to write my fantasy while you write your fantasy.
Yeah. And there's this whole story about how basically Tolkien wrote his from the standpoint of there is no higher truth and there is no God and whatever. And Lewis wrote Chronicles of Narnia as being kind of the fuck you to that of well, there is.
Well, I mean,
and that is I have no idea if that's an actual thing or not.
If you bothered to slog through the Silmarillion, that's
absolutely not.
Like, that it describes the pantheon of Lord of the Rings, and it reads like the fucking Bible, where it's like, and this dude did this, and it's like, okay, that's just fucking, okay, that's a lot to take in, and it's just written so dryly. But yeah, there is a pantheon, but it's more like, C.S. Lewis wrote fucking, Chronicles of Narnia with more like a very central god figure, as opposed to Tolkien, who, yes, there was a deity and there was a pantheon, there was a god, whatever, but it was more displaced from how things were going.
It was bullshit because you had to read about it in his shitty fucking DLC book that no one cared about. No one fucking cares about the Silmarillion.
Yeah, it's
for the true believers. That's what
Tolkien stopped giving a shit about the Silmarillion after like the first third of it was done.
Yeah.
Nobody gives a shit about it.
I'll give you that.
But no, like in Screwtape Letters, you get to see a lot more of like C.S. Lewis was like a caustic motherfucker sometimes, like, and that shows a lot more in shit like the Screwtape Letters than it does in the Chronicles of Narnia. Like there are hints of it in Chronicles of Narnia, but it's like really there in Screwtape Letters. It's really fucking funny, and it's really like dark.
Yeah, and I appreciate how quick of a read it was too. It's not.
It is. It's easy. It's pretty easy language to just fly through, and it's interesting. And it's done in the series of letters, so it's really easy to digest.
Yes.
On to the next quest.
Yeah.
Forward.
This quest was a little bit more like. I thought about it more afterwards, and I was like, that came across as being something way more than I had intended it to be.
You shitbag.
Yeah, I think I thought so at first, but then I'm like, well, I'm just gonna. Okay, so my way of approaching it at first was like trying to think of it. Luminaries, big enough for everybody recognizes they're luminaries, and then I'm like, well, fuck that, you know.
Your challenge is garbage.
I'm just like, oh, I can't do that. Like, I know. And one thing, at least, I read in more thoroughness, I was able to really get into something called the Gnostic Handbook this past month.
Okay.
Which, you know, I don't know if either of you have read, but I think it's especially the beginning of it, is a real nice kind of philosophical basis on Gnosticism. And, you know, the more I was reading that, the more, like, it talks a lot about allegory. Allegories constantly comes up in it, especially in the early part of it, and how important these different stories are for helping us essentially, you know, just take these abstract ideas of how the universe is structured and what's, you know, quote unquote, if you call them spirits, or what the divine is, or what God is, and just put a framework on it. But it's all very individual. You know, every one of us is going to have kind of a different relationship to this based on our lives, what we have, you know, experienced, and what we know about, what we've read, and all of that. And the use of these allegories over and over are ways to try to retell these, you might call them the mysteries that can be expressed to kind of layperson who's not like really being let into the mysteries, but allowing them to understand these, have like a framework to understand these concepts and to retell these stories. And like you guys, you know, you interviewed Chaz Moorhead, and you know, he talked about like The Matrix, you know, as being like the great Gnostic allegory movie. But it made me think more about like, well, what in my life what do I use as a frame of reference to understand some of these bigger mystical concepts? Like what comes up over and over again for me? So I'm going to start with the one that's probably the most foundational for me. Is going to probably sound very weird. that comes from my understanding of how the universe is structured, which is, or I use it as a way to, as an allegory for how I feel the universe is structured.
As long as it's not Atlas Shrugged, that's fine.
It is not
cool.
Atlas Shrugged. It is...
Good.
It
Good.
Is,
you passed the test.
Well... It's big devotion. I mean, I know Yara knows, but I don't know if Dreadnought, you know that I was a teenage objectivist. Did you know that?
I didn't even know that you were a teenage anything. I thought you were just spawned into this world as a full-grown adult.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have like the general mentality of someone probably way younger than I am.
I cannot ever, please don't take this the wrong way. I cannot ever imagine you being an adolescent.
I guess I won't. I don't even know what the fuck that would mean. Okay, so big build up for something that isn't that big of a deal. It's Flatland.
Oh, okay.
By Edwin A. Abbott, which read in middle school, geometry, I think, and I just immediately was very struck by the way it gives you this concept of what a fourth dimensional, world would be like. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what Flatland is based on an allegorical tale about A Square who lives on a world that's flat. It's two-dimensional. A Square is a two-dimensional being. And A Square is visited by A Sphere, which is a three-dimensional being. And A Square starts learning I forget the exact phrasing, but basically the gospel of the third dimension, and ends up getting locked in an insane asylum in Flatland because he now understands there is another direction another dimension of his world.
Yeah.
So it's a big math allegory, and they teach it to you in middle school or in school sometimes to try to get you to understand geometry better. But I immediately was like, wow, you could apply this to our world, third dimension, there could be a fourth dimension, it's a very, very simple allegorical tale. But I just feel like I'm always bringing this up again when I'm discussing things like the nature of the universe and how things are structured and what are these things that we call spirits or that we interact with and what we believe with my husband. I bring up Flatland because after all these years of discussing it with him, he knows that's sort of my base for understanding these things. And when I can bring it back to the allegory, then we suddenly have a common language that we can discuss these things in. And I think that's what's so important about these allegories over and over is they're a way to express these things that we can kind of wrap our heads around. Something that was in the Mystic Kabbalah, which I still haven't finished yet, but I read some of.
There's a lot to that book.
But
it's got bullet points.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does have bullet points. But one of my favorite things in it that she says, and I'm probably going to get as close as possible, but the writer says that words are to thoughts as symbols are to intuition. And I really, really like that because I greatly believe that words are here for us to allow to hold abstract ideas. So if you see symbols as a way to hold these intuitive ideas, not like a type of abstract idea, that for me was a real stepping stone for understanding more about the use of symbols and what they actually are representing. And then getting into the allegory is kind of the next step of that the allegory is a way for us to represent and hold in our minds an idea that's almost too big for language and can be discussed. And so that's why Flatland is so important to me. I'm always coming back to it. I might mention again in the future of other ideas, but I also recommend I didn't get the book. I don't have the name of it in front of me. I'll mention it later. Maybe I'll mention it on the Discord. There's another book somebody wrote in the 20th century that kind of expands upon the ideas in Flatland. It is not necessary. It's not an allegory. It's more of a math book, but it's very accessible and very interesting way of expanding the ideas in it. Okay, moving on. Other luminaries. So I wanted to bring up Kafka because I had to, because he's just like one of my favorite writers. And I was talking to my husband about this. Like, I think the Metamorphosis makes a great allegory for the idea of having a spiritual being put into a physical body that is, imperfect.
Wow,
and that we have
that
to...
actually makes a lot of sense.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's, I hadn't thought of the Metamorphosis as a Gnostic allegory of us being trapped in a flesh prison and instead of being a cockroach, but I'll take it. I'll
I know,
I'll
right?
absolutely
Like,
take
the
it.
moment when I first saw it, I'm like, oh my god, it's perfect. I love it.
You never think about Kafka being enlightened because Kafka's such a fucking bummer.
That's why I love him. That's why I love him.
You never think about him knowing shit because he's just so busy being like, nah, everything sucks.
I mean,
Like-
if you lived in fucking Prague in the 30s, you'd do the same.
I don't live in Prague in the 30s and I do the same. So there's that.
Yeah. But yeah, I really like that. So, yeah, that's completely put me on some other shit, so I'll be thinking about that shit later.
I probably should save for that one for last because it's short, sweet, and it definitely works.
No, I really, really like that.
No, that's like it's really poignant.
Other ones. Oh, there's some other ones that I don't know if I am well read enough in them or educated enough to actually explain it. But I'm going to go ahead and
Do it.
try out. So I had this idea in the beginning of the month that I was going to, during the shutdown and being at home, read Capital by Karl Marx.
Oof.
Have not finished it yet.
It's
But
a bit.
I don't blame you.
I had this idea because from what I have read and understand of dialectic materialism, I just had this feeling, this intuitive feeling that I had like kind of a Gnostic connection for some reason. I think it's because like dialect. Okay, let's see if I can explain the basics. Dialectic materialism. Okay, from what I can.
You got
like
this.
I said, I'm going
You're
to try my
doing
best.
great.
Basically tries to explain how, because of we need to meet our material needs, is why we have the systems we have, okay? And that they're all, both individually, every individual element of the system, interacts with every other element, and it both has its own kind of path as well as its intersections with everything else. So, like, dialectic materialism tries to tell why capitalism, as a means of trying to meet our material needs, fails. Okay?
Okay.
And I think what makes it kind of like a Gnostic idea is that it is trying to discuss, like, Gnosticism is, parts of it will discuss, like we said, like being trapped in a meat body, right? And that our spiritual selves and our higher selves are always is being kind of obstructed by the fact that we have to constantly meet our material needs, and that so all these systems that are in place to try to meet the material needs, and then when they are distributed unevenly and everything, actually also affects us spiritually and not just physically, not just our material needs. So, I will read more of Capital and hopefully have more to say on the subject.
Well, no.
I wouldn't recommend it.
I mean,
I wouldn't recommend. Just read the manifesto. That's really all you need.
I have. Actually, Capital it's been interesting so far. I've been on YouTube. There's a professor. Like, I'm so bad with names. There's a professor who's taught a class on Capital like every year, and there's one of his classes on YouTube that you can like follow along. You can read it and then do the class with him, and that's what I've been kind of doing to try to help me through it.
yeah, I
So-
mean,
so
your argument totally makes sense that, it's because with our spiritual selves, our higher selves, our spark from the source being bound to these meat suits, we have to take care of the meat suits in order to further pursue how we evolve and get closer to the source and understand shit. Because if you're too busy struggling trying to figure out how am I going to not die today and find food, you're not going to be worried about, trying to escape the meat suit, because you kind of want to keep the meat suit going a little bit.
Yeah,
So one of Marx's big ideas, and I'm not super familiar with it in Capital, but one of his big ideas is the concept that we have been fooled into believing that the materialistic needs are the reason for existing.
Yeah.
Like you in order for capitalism to succeed, you need to fool the working, like the wage slaves, into believing that work is the reason for doing stuff. Right?
Yeah.
And that in the way that you're talking about is a very Gnostic idea, because you suddenly get trapped into this idea of thinking that your body is you.
Yeah.
Like your meat sack is you, or your brain is you, or, whatever material thing you have. You are your house, you are your car, you are your reputation to your neighborhood, right? These things are not what make you. These are things that you accumulate.
Well, right, and that gets into, like, the Gnostic concept of the different aspects of what you are, because you have, like, the I, which is your physical self, but you also have your consciousness versus, like, the consciousness that exists without external stimuli, being in dreams, versus the you that you are in unconsciousness.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there are still different aspects of the self, but yeah, it's with the whole, like, keeping yourself alive. It again goes back to like, say, the allegory of the cave, with you're seeing purely the illusions of the true world. You're focused on the shadows, and the shadows are the obtaining of material bullshit.
I would say it's even more apt to think of it as, like, and it comes up, and we'll be talking about this in the next SO topical, with Phil Hines' idea of mistaking the map for the territory.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And actually, speaking of mistaking the map for the territory, next person on the list, which I don't have any notes on, so I can't remember exactly why, other than I put David Foster Wallace down because I decided to reread Infinite Jest. I just picked it up, I started reading it, and I know it's kind of he's kind of gauche now. I guess people, like, he's not as, a thing you're supposed to read anymore, but I don't care. Like it. I started reading it again, and actually just last night I was reading the section on the game they play at the tennis academy, the kids play, and there's a huge argument about mistaking the territory for the map, or the map for the territory. It's a big fight in the game. Anyway, I think David Foster Wallace is worth reading. I think it had a lot of really poignant things to say about the future, and I think Infinite Jest was definitely a portent for our times. Like
a luminary, one might say.
A luminary.
Yes.
I think he saw the future, like, because the whole thing with Infinite Jest is the idea that all America is a very addicted nation. It's addicted to being entertained. It's addicted to drugs. Like, that's like basically the main thread throughout the whole movie is addiction and the need to constantly basically not live and just distract yourself all the time. Infinite Jest. And Infinite Jest is the name of a movie in the book that's a character who's pretty much dead in the book, but made that if you watch it, you will never want to stop watching it. You'll do anything to keep watching it, and you'll basically won't sleep, won't eat, and will be willing to have your fingers cut off in order to just keep watching it and be distracted.
Yeah, it's kind of like with Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World. Like, the entire society in the dystopianism comes from seeking of physical pleasure.
It's kind of like the exact opposite of when I watched Panic Room, because I would have had my fingers chopped off to be able to stop watching that movie.
It's almost not that, because it's not really about hedonism. It's almost anhedonism, the desire to not live at all, to choose to rather die and not live and just be entertained and distracted. It's not necessarily pleasure. It's almost not even that enjoyable. You just don't want to. You don't want to interact with life. It's escapism.
It's escapism, and like that's a thing that is very poignant. I was just gonna bring up. I really like and I get shit for this all the time too. I really liked Consider the Lobster. Like,
me too.
Yeah, and his essays. Like, his essays are just fucking funny. Like, he's a dickhead, and he's kind of a hipster douchebag, but they're funny. Like, they make me laugh. So
it's one of those things where it's like, it's just, it speaks to me because I'm a bit of a douchebag in my own special way, and so whatever poignancy is in there, I can like the art of his work, I can relate to and understand it in a certain way and apply it to myself, and I wouldn't expect everybody else to be able to. So it's not your thing. It's not your thing. It's cool.
I would like to officially welcome you into Ordo Templi Douchebag Alice. For we are all douchebags here.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, fuck it. Let's get on to quests. I can't say it with a straight face. I just can't do it. Let's get on to this episode's for Non-Paradigmal Magic. Yara, I'm going to have you start out with one.
Okay, so stemming back from my interest in the whole non-paradigmal thing with the whole creepypasta, whatever, I would like you to devise a ritual that is full of arbitrary shit in order to meet an unknown entity. So, like, there are lots of them, like the Sages of Four I had. There's another one that was pretty popular, about, like, going into a bathroom, or a very populated bathroom, and lighting a clove cigarette, and then watching...
There's 3 of them.
Yeah, lighting clove cigarettes while watching a mirror, and the cherry from the cigarette will turn into eyes, and then this demon will come out of the mirror to talk to you or some shit and grant you wishes or whatever. And
he'll tell you anything that you want to know, but you have to stop smoking the cigarette before it's gone, because if you smoke the whole thing, then the demon never leaves.
Yeah, there's that. There's also like one man hide and seek, which is you get basically like a voodoo doll and like huck it into a fucking bathtub, and now you have to spend the rest of the night in your house like hiding from some weird entity. There's a lot of fucking creepypasta shit where it summons or calls upon some weird entity. Midnight Man is another one. But either way, come up with some weird, spooky, arbitrary ritual that summons some weird entity.
I wrote down in my notes, up the spooky.
Up the spooky. Do it.
Okay. Well, that kind of, I'm going to have to trip over my dick thinking of something, because mine was going to be just do the Sages of Four.
Yeah, you could do that too.
But that's the same thing as what your challenge is, more or less. My challenge to you is going to be to start working with one of the egregores that we've made.
Yeah.
Just pick one, start working with it, and see what happens. I feel like that's a lot less of a douchey thing than, hey, find a luminary.
In which she completely disregards.
Yeah, that's fine. That's totally fine. I would completely disregard it too.
Because I'm a nerd who likes to read for the most part, so I enjoyed thinking about these sort of things. I wish I did more literary analysis, so I was better at breaking down the screw tape letters for people.
No, that's what we have Yara for. That's his whole shtick.
Yep.
It's fine.
I read the shitty books, so you don't have to.
Goddamn right.
All right, and to wrap up, we're going to...
Oh yeah, we have the divination.
Yep.
For this one.
So this episode, we're going to use the gematria, which is the gematria is basically a form of divination, whatever. It stems from Judaic mysticism in which each letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the 22 letters, each has a certain number, and those numbers can be rearranged, and those numbers, if you take numbers from one phrase, you can then extrapolate it into other phrases based on the same numbers. It's a lot of numerology and jumbling and shit like that, and it's super interesting, and I love it. There's a English gematria, there's a Jewish gematria, but
Hebrew?
Yes, Hebrew. Yeah, that's the word. But we'll extrapolate from that. So I want the first word that comes to mind. Think of it. Give it to me.
Gnome.
Okay? What do you got, Dreadnought?
Gobbles McCock.
That's 2 words. Give me
You said
a
it could be
word, and
phrases.
that's a name.
You said it could be
That's-
phrases.
Okay. Gobbles McCock. And then I'm going to say frankly. If we extrapolate that and we're using gematrix.org. Oh, so the first one that comes up is Harry Potter. That comes from the Jewish gematria.
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. We also have array. God's clever. Love and light. The manifestation of Lucifer. The fallen as the angel snake apple tree.
Ooh, I like that one.
Corrupt politicians. I feel so fat and ugly.
Wait, was that gematria, or were you just...
That's from the Jewish gematria. I feel so fat and ugly. That's not just me saying that. I am Sofa King Austin Lee Meredith, and the broom and heir of Satan's release.
Wait, say the
Okay.
last one you cut out.
The broom and heir of Satan's release.
Flatulence.
We also have I don't think so he's the man. Jesus Christ is revealed. The X Factor contestant. All we had to do was be honest. So, from these, what do you gather, Dreadnought? Here's another one.
A lot of information to take
Here's
in.
another one.
I'm just saying.
You die quick.
Wow.
That's another one.
So the 2 that really stuck out to me were the manifestation of Lucifer and I don't think so he's the man. That to me talks about the challenge that Yara gave, which was contacting an unknown entity. It's going to be something that happens, and it's going to be something that just kind of it's going to be more intuitive. You're going to just feel it and be like, "Oh, this is the thing I'm supposed to do," and you're just going to do it. And it might not make sense in like this way that we tend to think about ritual magic, which is like, oh, I have to do all of these steps in all the right order. You're just gonna like wing it basically, and it's gonna be effective, but it's gonna feel different because you are typically someone who likes to plan things out a lot, and this is gonna be something that is not that at all. Those are, like I said, the 2 that just kind of really stuck out to me the most.
Yeah, there's a giant list of these phrases. I had just grabbed some while I was going through it.
What is this? The snake in the tree one. I'm going to want you to repeat that one.
That one is the fallen as the angel snake apple tree. There are a couple other ones that are like I'm flipping through all of the possibilities as I'm saying this, but there are some that I hadn't read that do kind of jump out to me. Well, not the holy threesome. That wasn't.
No,
that wasn't one.
Nope. Absolutely not.
No, that one had shown up a little bit. But there are other ones that kind of reflect what Dreadnought had said. Such as "Come out of her, my people." Walk through a hell message. All the stories are true. Hidden in plain sight message. So I'm getting from these that you're going to be getting something from doing these challenges that will reveal something about yourself that you weren't quite aware of, especially like I did mention like the coming of Christ, I think it was. but something's going to come forth. Something's going to come out of you that, you know, you might not have realized before. It, like Dreadnought had said, the manifestation of Lucifer. You're going to realize something. Something's going to come out. You are going to learn something great from doing these.
I would also kind of tack onto that the idea that it might not necessarily be something you don't realize, but it might be something that you haven't been able to articulate.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Or like put words to.
Articulation would be nice.
So yeah, that's pretty much what I've got. Do you have anything, Cologne? Like, did anything like really stand out to you?
I mean, like the fallen as the angel snake apple tree kind of stuck out to me. Or like the fallen as the angel, most specifically. Something about the fact that it's what's the word I'm looking for? Fuck, I can't think of the word.
I don't know. We've got increase in UFO sightings is also on here.
Hey, somebody
well,
call Tom DeLonge.
Well, you saw they released those UFO videos.
That's
right?
true. Yeah. There's also one that says play Counter-Strike. So,
no, absolutely not.
Not doing it.
There's
Told you I'm playing Wolfenstein right now.
Yeah.
Did you get New Blood? You should get New Blood. That
I
game's
don't
fun.
have that yet. I'd gotten New Order because, you know, it was old and dirt cheap.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I've got the new Colossus too, but
ooh,
dude,
there's
cheap Steam sales.
There's destroyed reptilian agenda. So
ooh,
you might get that one.
It's gonna be Valiant 4 coming in to kill the lizard overlords.
Oh man!
Destroy the reptilian agenda. Ooh, there's another one. The Great Extermination. So
oh god, this is getting
this is
real weird.
Too real.
Oh yeah. There's the Confederate States is also on here too. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Hard no, bud.
Nuclear war already happened.
Yeah, we already did that part. Once.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe I don't think those
I feel like we're getting off the rails. I feel like we're getting off the rails a little bit.
I don't know. Post-left anarchy? That's a good one, right?
Yes, I'll take that one.
Yeah, okay. That's I feel like we got plenty to work with there.
Cashless society.
No. I don't want a fire ban for this. This is dumb. All right. Well, fuck. I feel like that's pretty much all we have. I want to throw a real quick thank you to our sponsors for this episode, and also a big thank you to our patrons for hanging out and supporting what we do. If you're interested in checking that out, we do have a Patreon. It is patreon.com/faithblindcouncil. We also are on a bunch of other stuff. There's a stinger for this. I don't know why I'm saying it again, but check it out. It's all there. The only thing left for us to say is a real quick hail skafuckle.
Hail skafuckle.
Hail skafuckle.
All right, and we're going to get out of here. We will see you next time. Peace.
Later.
Be seeing ya.
This has been a production of the Faith Blind Council. Please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/faithblindcouncil. We would also like to thank our sponsors. You can support us by supporting them. You can also contact us on Twitter at FBC Podcast, the number 1, on Instagram at FBC Podcast, and via email at faithblindpod@gmail.com.